The first kind of graph that we want to create is going to be a simple bar or column graph. And to do that, we're going to use it for our top 10 producers. So the first thing I need to do is to find the data set for my top 10 producers and open it up in whatever spreadsheet format or application you tend to work with. In my case, I'm using Numbers, but this also works well with Microsoft Excel or even Google Sheets. Now the data from here is that we want to focus on are the different countries and the value of how much they produce. So those are the only two sets of data that we really care about. Hold that thought. Let's jump back into Adobe Illustrator. Now to create any of these graphs, look at the bottom of your toolbox and locate the graphing tools. When you click and hold on it, you can see you've got a variety of different kinds of graphs that you can create. Some of these I use more often than others, and some of these kind of produce the same thing just in a different style. In my case, we want to choose the column graph tool because I want to create a bar chart that has them all stacked in vertical columns. Do know there is a bar graph tool, but in this case it's going to stack everything horizontally. So with the column graph tool selected, you can click and drag and choose the area that you want your graph to fill in. Now when I do this, I'm intentionally going to give myself some room to place the numbers. So I'm going to start it right about here and then click and drag and just rough in the area for it. When I let go of my mouse, you can see that it starts to add on some numbers on the side. And again, I've left plenty of room for that. And it starts to build out my column graph based on the spreadsheet that automatically pops up. By default, it's going to give you a number 1. We're just going to delete that away for now. Let's jump back into our spreadsheet and copy the data. In my case, I'm going to select just the countries. We'll go up to Edit and Copy. We can jump back into Adobe Illustrator and make sure this first cell is selected, not any of the other ones, and certainly not the insertion point. With that cell selected, you can go up to Edit and Paste, and it will paste everything in here in that first column that we're looking for. Let's do the same for the values. Again, return to here. I'm going to select all of my values, go up to Edit and Copy, and then jump into the second column, making sure that cell is selected. We'll go up to Edit and Paste, and it'll give our numbers into here as well. Now, once we've got these values selected, you can then click on the checkbox, and this will start to build out your column graph. Now, the graph itself is very, very rough. We're going to go in now and do some tweaking to add a little bit of design and to clean up a couple of things. Once we're done with this data, we can click the red X and then it will close it out. And by the way, if you need to go back and make any changes to data, you can always go up to Object, down to Graph, and here's where you can open up that data set again and be able to make any changes. Now, this is a very unique object in Adobe Illustrator. It's not like a regular object that allows me to click on individual parts. By default, everything is grouped together and all the data is grouped into making this graphic. So before we do any major edits, let's see what we can do with the graph itself. First of all, I want to make sure I can see the lines that go across this graph. So with it selected, I can go up to Object, back down to Graph, and open up Type. With the graph type open, you can see where you can actually change up the style or type of graph in case you've accidentally chosen the wrong one. If you want to make these bars a little bit thinner or how close they're clustered together, you can adjust this number. What I want to do is I want to have some lines go across our value axis. So at the very top, I'm going to choose my value axis and set my tick marks to have their length from none to be the full width of my value. When I say OK, you can see it'll draw off the numbers from here. If you wanted to subdivide it, you can also go back to your graph type and again choose the value axis, and you can draw tick marks per subdivision. In my case, maybe I wanted to divide it off every 2. We'll say OK, and that'll give me subdivisions between all of those. So this will come in handy depending on how you want to set up your design. Now, if we want to get into actually changing the look and feel of the content that's here, this is where we want to ungroup everything. Going up to Object, choose Ungroup. This will give you a warning saying if you do this, you won't be able to change the data or any of the graph styles, which is actually okay. I like the way it looks for now, so I'm going to guarantee and lock in its design. You may have to ungroup a couple of times to ungroup everything, but once it's done, you should be able to select each individual part and click and drag and move it around. One of the first things I want to change is the direction that the words at the bottom are moving in. In this case, you can see they're all jumbled together. I want to be able to rotate them so they're at an angle and I can read each one. So to do this, I'm going to select all of the stuff down here. And again, make sure that they're nice and ungrouped. And with all of them selected, go from Object to Transform and choose Transform Each. This will allow you to apply a transformation to each of the values, and in our case we want it to have a different angle. I've got Preview turned on, and you can see it will rotate them at that particular angle. Now right now they're being rotated at their central point, but if I was to choose maybe their top edge or their bottom edge, I can get them to rotate and still stay nice and aligned. So I'm going to choose the bottom right corner. There it is. Again, choose an angle that lets them fit really nicely. In my case, maybe 54 degrees is okay. We'll make it a solid 55. Then I can say okay. Then all I need to do is to move them back into place. In this case, moving mainland China and everything back where it needs to be. Also, while I'm here, I can do any edits that are necessary for it too. So I can use my type tool. Maybe I'll get rid of the word mainland for China and just keep it as central or basic China so that it fits nicely into here. Then finally I can select all of these and let's have them aligned . With this done, we can play around with the colors of each of our little bar graphs, so we can choose them. Again, you may either use your direct selection tool to choose the individual bar, or you may want to ungroup them. In our case, I'm going to choose everything all at once, and we'll make it darker. Next, I want my lines to be different colors as well. So I'm going to use my direct selection tool and select every other line by holding down Shift and clicking and dragging over those. And then to change their color, all I've got to do is to bring up their stroke style and make it a different color. Let's do the same for our in-between ones. Holding down Shift. Maybe for these, since they're half of it, I'll do it as a different color. I'll make it a little bit thinner. So I'll open up my stroke panel, and maybe I'll make those a dashed line. We'll set it to be something smaller for those. So now my bar graph reads a lot better. While I'm at it, I'm going to get rid of the black line that's around all of these. Much better. Finally, I can tweak the text that I'm using for my value fields. Since everything is being measured in millions of tons, I'm simply going to abbreviate this 250 M, and I'll make note of it when I change up the text for this particular area. So here's how I'll do this one, 50 million for this one. Again, we'll highlight this, and let's change up the font. We'll keep it consistent with ATC Onyx Bold. And I'll also change up the color of this one too. So we'll set that off. And we'll have each one of these set off and be a different color for that. Finally, I'll scale this down and make sure everything fits nicely inside of this particular area. Now you can see when I scale it down, I've got a lot of open area that I could either resize this rectangle, or I can find some interesting facts or some text to fill in this particular area. So it's really up to you how you want this to fit. Some other things you could do is by taking your name and simply rotating it to be vertical and then making it a different color to show up on top of here. I kind of like this particular setup. Now that's not going to work really well for Philippines or Brazil or anything else, so maybe I could move these up here. There's a lot of different ways you can play around with this. Actually, let's see what this would look like if I placed all of these up here at the top, just to get them to fit. So this is kind of the challenge in working with these kind of infographics, making sure they're nice and readable, but also making sure that it fills in the area that you're tending to work with. That will allow me to make this nice and large and actually fill in the area I'm working with. Perhaps I'll even change up the colors to make this stand out and not be so bold against my design. Once you've got everything roughed in, simply go back and make any tweaks that are necessary so that it looks the way you want it to look for your final design. Once you've got everything the way you like, simply return to your layers panel. I was creating all of this in layer 2. I'm going to call this my top 10 producers layer. I'm going to lock down that layer so I don't accidentally move it or make changes to it as well. Next, we can focus on the different graphs for the different parts as well.